Okay guys, let's talk about Dynamic Trunking Protocol, or DTP for short. It's a Cisco Layer 2 proprietary protocol that allows switches to negotiate trunks between them. And there's a couple different modes that you can set when you're configuring DTP on the switches. As you can see here, I've got switch 1 that's connected to switch 0 on 4 different interfaces. And switch 1's command line interface is here, switch 0 is here. And what I thought we would do is just configure each of the different modes and see if it matches up to this graphic that we have here. So on switch 1, or switch 0 interface fast Ethernet 01, I want to configure dynamic auto. Fast Ethernet 02, I want to configure dynamic desirable. Fast Ethernet 03, configure trunk. Fast Ethernet 04, configure access. And then we'll roll through each of these and see if they actually form like this graphic says. So let's go ahead and get into it and see what happens. First off, though, I want to show you by default, if we just do, nothing's configured on this switch yet. These are new switches, so if we just do a show interface switch port, you can see Fast Ethernet 01 by default has dynamic auto configured on it, and as does Fast Ethernet 01 on this side. So you can see if dynamic auto is configured on both sides, or by default since it's already configured, then your switch port's going to negotiate to an access port. And that's what's happening here. Dynamic auto on both sides, which means our operational mode, if I can highlight correctly, is static access. So let's actually go ahead and I'll show you. Let's do a show run. You can see Fast Ethernet 1, 2, 3, and 4 have nothing configured on that. And this side, we'll just leave this side. Once it's configured, we'll leave this alone. So interface Fast Ethernet 01, switch port, trunk, mode, and then you can see switch port mode on dynamic, and then you can see our different options, auto or desirable. So let's set this to auto, interface 01, and you can see if we do a show run, nothing happened because it's the default command, so it's not going to show up. So let's go into interface Fast Ethernet 02, and we'll make that a switch port. This one wants dynamic desirable. Okay. Interface Fast Ethernet 03, switch port, and this one isn't a dynamic. We'll just set switch port mode trunk, right? And then interface Fast Ethernet 04, we're going to set the switch port mode to access, and that aligns with 01, 02, 03, and 04 on switch 0. This guy up here. Okay, so then let's go into switch 1, and we will configure all 4 interfaces for dynamic auto, and then we'll see if they negotiate to what this chart says. Config T, let's do an interface range, Fast Ethernet 01 through 04, switch port mode dynamic, our options auto or desirable. This one, I'm not sure what I said before, auto or desirable, but we're going to configure this one first for dynamic auto, which is the default, so technically we didn't have to do that. And then let's do a show int switch port, and we'll see what each one negotiated to. So it's dynamic auto, as is the other side, dynamic auto, and that negotiates to an access. That's correct. And then Fast Ethernet 02 on switch 1 is dynamic auto, and the other side is dynamic desirable, and that negotiates to a trunk port, as you can see here. And Fast Ethernet 03 set to dynamic auto, and the other side is set to a trunk. It negotiates to a trunk. And Fast Ethernet 04 set to dynamic auto, the other side is set to access, and it negotiates to an access port. So that's working properly. Now let's see if we do the same thing. Config T, interface range, Fast Ethernet 01 through Fast Ethernet 04, switch port mode dynamic. Now we want to set it to desirable. And as you can see, the only difference really between desirable and auto is if both sides are set to auto, your switch port are going to negotiate to access. Whereas if one side is desirable, then, and as long as the other side is in access, then desirable is going to negotiate to a trunk port. So now the only difference should be Fast Ethernet 01 should negotiate to a trunk port instead of an access port. Everything else should be the same as in auto. So let's take another look, show interface switch port, and it will be fast Ethernet 01. We now have dynamic desirable on this side, dynamic auto on the other side, and it negotiates to a trunk, as does the other side. The other side should do the same. Let's just check it to make sure. Fast Ethernet 01 on the other side, but set to dynamic auto on this side, negotiates to a trunk because switch 1 is set to dynamic desirable. Okay, let's run through real quick and just check out the rest of the interfaces. Dynamic desirable on this side negotiates to a trunk because it's dynamic desirable on both sides. Fast Ethernet 03 is a trunk. Fast Ethernet 04 is set to dynamic desirable, negotiates to static access. So far everything is lining up. And then, so those are your dynamic options. And really all the other ones are saying is that you're going to manually set this side to a trunk, and it will negotiate to a trunk on everything except the access port, because whenever you have a trunk connected to an access port, you're going to run into some issues because they just don't talk well to each other. And that's why it says limited connectivity on these two. And if you set yours to a trunk and the others are dynamic, they'll negotiate to a trunk. If you set yours for access and the others are dynamic, then they'll negotiate to access. And if they have like things on both sides, trunk, trunk, access, access, then they're going to negotiate to those settings, trunk and access. So we'll run through real quick again. For the sake of time, let's just say config t int f01. We'll do the range again. Range f01 through 4. Switch port mode trunk. Show int switch 01 trunk, 02 trunk, 03 trunk, 04 negotiates to a trunk, but just know that it will have limited connectivity because 04 on this side is configured as an access port. Okay, and then we'll do it again. Big T, interface range, switch port mode, access. Show in switch port. We are set statically configured to an access port. We negotiate to an access port because the other side is dynamic auto on fast Ethernet 01. Static access is negotiated because the other side is dynamic desirable. Fast Ethernet 03 on this side is set to access. The other side is set to trunk. And it negotiates to access. However, you're going to have limited connectivity. Let's see what it negotiates to on this side. That would be fast Ethernet 03. So yeah, on this side, you're going to see a trunk because it's set to trunk, and on this side you're going to see an access because it's set to access. There's no dynamic happening here, so you're going to have limited connectivity. And our last one is fast Ethernet 04. Statically set to access, negotiates to access, doesn't really negotiate because it's set to access, and it's an access port. Now, the last thing I want to show you, because I created a separate packet tracer file for this video because I don't like to use dynamic things or auto things that happen automatically. I like to specifically set things on the network because you get into dynamic or auto configurations and you start to lose control of it and not really know what's going to happen. So let's go back in, and I want to turn off DTP altogether. So that is switch port, no negotiate. That's how you turn off DTP. And I'm going to do it on all 4 switch ports. Show int switch port, and we will take a look here. Fast Ethernet 01, static access access, 2 access access, 3 access access. Okay, so everything just goes back to an access port because we've turned off DTP. So that's just kind of a primer on it, quick overview of dynamic trunking protocol. Hopefully that helps you understand better and reference a chart like this to try to get a better idea of it before you sit for your exam. Alright, questions, comments below, and subscribe to keep track of future videos. Thanks.